Hello, Western Carolina University. I am pleased to introduce MBA 64181 Team Foxtrot, featuring Yoav Gutman, Spencer Kirkpatrick, and myself, Christina Corey. The Foxtrot team has selected the Toyota Prius as our brand of choice for study. We sought a brand that's innovative, successful, publicly traded, and that strives towards sustainability. As the first mass-produced hybrid vehicle, we also expect there will be much to learn for our team about how the Toyota Prius was developed as a product and introduced to the market, and then how it maintained its position as other hybrids were produced by other automakers around the world. The Prius is manufactured in Aichi, Japan by Toyota Motor Corporation, the largest motor vehicle company in the world. Toyota has sold vehicles in the US for more than 60 years, and the company boasts nearly 1,500 dealerships, making their vehicles available almost anywhere in the country. Although the Prius has a relatively low market share among all vehicles, more than 2 million units were sold in the US and Japan just last year. The Prius was the first mass-produced hybrid car, and it is manufactured in Japan. It was launched back in 1997 and was the first plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, also known as a PHEV. Electric vehicles are a category, and within that category, there are also battery electric vehicles, or BEVs, which are powered entirely by a battery and do not have an internal combustion engine, which means they do not require gasoline. In this category, experts believe there is a price-performance trade-off between a traditional internal combustion engine vehicle and an all-electric vehicle, because all-electric vehicles are more expensive to produce and therefore they're more expensive to buy. It's believed that for that reason, many folks who buy the vehicles prefer the hybrid, also because it gives them the option to get gas on the road, assuaging their fear that their battery could run out. At the same time, battery electric vehicles are a fast emerging category, and the rate of sales has been accelerating in the past few years, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. The Prius product line itself includes 7 models this year, ranging from about $24,000 to $33,000, making it a mid-range vehicle. Within that range, buyers can choose such options as all-wheel drive, which is a more expensive Prius. Until 2020, the Prius only offered the hybrid vehicle, or the plug-in hybrid electric PHEV. In February 21, that's this year, Toyota announced that they would be launching 3 new vehicles, 2 of which would be PHEV vehicles in the US, and also 1 BEV, or battery electric powered vehicle, for the US market. So that's big news for the Prius. Prius's competition at the same time is the Honda Civic Hybrid, that's the biggest competitor, the Honda Insight, and the Hyundai Ioniq. And I'm sure that in the battery electric vehicle category, you've heard of Tesla, Hyundai, and also Volkswagen. And you may not have heard of NIO and BYD. NIO is a popular in China, and BYD is an emerging brand. There's also in the category a subscription model, which doesn't involve the actual vehicles, but there are companies that allow ride-sharing programs of electric vehicles for folks who want to enjoy an electric vehicle experience, but don't want to actually have to invest in a vehicle of their own. In terms of why people buy the Prius, we could, of course, do an entire separate presentation about that, but we found some interesting insights in our research. Early research of Prius buyers in California, that's back in 2007, showed that many buyers did not have a deep concern or understanding of environmental issues. Many buyers instead, when purchasing the Prius, were doing it as a display of economic power. That is to show that they were at least doing their part for the planet and had the money and finances to do so. The quote from our presentation is that only a basic understanding of environmental issues or ecological benefits were there and instead were bought as a symbol of preserving the environment so they can incorporate it into a narrative of who they are and who they wish to be. So it really references the emotional motivators we've been learning about in class and the importance of deep connections with brands. And we're going to show a short commercial to show that response for the California market.
Prius, at 60 miles per gallon city, it's the car more people said they'd buy again.
The commercial also shows a bit of I feel a sense of belonging emotional motivator and other important emotional motivators we've been learning about it. So this has been fun. As part of our research, we also did the political, economic, social, technology, as well as legal and environmental research, also known as a PEST model. So big things are happening for the Prius, especially this year, namely with the new administration in January 2021. So the administration itself didn't make that much of a difference, but the things that happened quickly after inauguration day do have a significant impact on the market opportunity for the Prius. First, the US re-entered the Paris Climate Agreement. That means we want to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050, meaning we're taking more and giving less. Also, China has done the same thing with a goal of 2060. In addition, there was an executive order to replace the government's US fleet of vehicles, which is 643,000 vehicles, with electric vehicles and all electric vehicles at that, and to support not only that fleet, but the hybrid and battery electric vehicles across the country. There is an initiative to add 500,000 new electric vehicles charging stations. Another political factor is the importance of keeping good relations with the countries that mine lithium. These include primarily Chile, Australia, and China. Economically, the situation is mostly positive for the Prius as well. Unemployment is at a 6-year record low, which may surprise you. Consumer confidence is relatively high. It went up in February 2021, most likely with all the changes with the new year, including the new administration. Interest rates are the lowest they've been in the past 50 years, which of course has a significant impact on vehicle purchases. Gas prices are also low. They have been increasing since the inauguration based on some of the decisions internationally the administration has made. And although last year was not a great year for US auto manufacturers, most vehicle manufacturers saw a tremendous recovery in December. The Prius, unfortunately, their sales were down almost 32% year over year. But with all these other opportunities, we can see there's an opportunity to turn that around. In the environment, we'll go to environmental, even though it's not the core of the PEST. Of course, transportation is the largest global source of greenhouse gas emissions. So your vehicle choice can have a significant effect on the environment. Toyota themselves also have an initiative called the Toyota Environmental Challenge. They want to help their company be net zero by 2050 as well. It's important to note environmentally also that recent climate-driven events are increasing the US rate of electrical blackouts. I'm sure you noticed that California has had rolling blackouts because of fires, and there was a big storm in Texas just recently that cut off electric to many, many households, and then of course would cut off electricity to charging stations for vehicles as well. More about our PEST that shows the market evolving quickly for the Prius brand. in this area of social factors, it's very important to understand the adoption rate and life cycle for hybrids and full electric vehicles. A Toyota executive was quoted saying, if you move too soon, you will fail. And if you move too late, you will miss the opportunity. Elon Musk, the head of, or former head of Tesla, said the same thing, that it's very important to understand the market and that rushing to the market would be a disaster because there's simply not enough electricity and access to electric power stations to charge these cars. Of course, we need to remember that these vehicles are often purchased as a statement as opposed to simply a commitment to the environment. So the change in the administration's attitude about the environment doesn't mean a sea change across the market. Of course, consumer fears about battery life and access to charging stations will persist. There has been a US renaissance with trucks and SUVs, and to our knowledge, the Prius has not put that type of vehicle in the category. And we also saw in research that auto sales are expected to improve this year, tied to optimism about the vaccine and that we are hopefully turning a corner with the pandemic. Finally, made in the US attitudes might be affected because the Prius to date has only been manufactured in Japan. Technology-wise, we're noting that households are increasingly pulling power off the power grid because, as you see on some TV commercials, we have 8 or more devices in our house tied up to the grid, and there may not be sufficient bandwidth, as we noted. Good news is that there's a company called Blink that's part of rapidly expanding the charging network, and they're going to be part of installing the 500,000 new charging stations. Also with technology, a reminder that there's a lower price point with the internal combustion vehicle. And again, a Toyota executive themselves said, well, if we have enough batteries to make 1.5 million hybrid cars and sell them at a certain price point, it's difficult to make a decision to put them in 28,000 electric vehicles instead with only a slightly higher price point. In the legal environment, there's not much news except that there have been several lawsuits filed against the Prius. A most recent that suggests that Prius brakes tend to fail in certain situations. I've seen other lawsuits that some mechanics think Priuses are difficult to work on, that they claim that they allege that they've received electric shocks and such. But I see the market offering a tremendous opportunity for Prius, and I will finally turn it over to Spencer Kirkpatrick.
Okay, so for our SWOT analysis of the Toyota Prius brand, SWOT stands for, obviously, as we've learned, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that are for and against an organization and its brands. For strength, brand reputation, that's what Toyota has really been built off of in the past, really since they've been, came to the market in 1937, and then ever since then. As far as Prius goes, they've always had a really strong consumer satisfaction rate. And also just across their other, vehicles they've also released, from hybrid to conventional engines, they've always had a very good, really just brand loyalty. Another big strength of Toyota is their Toyota production system. So the Toyota production system is a continuously evolving manufacturing style. So it really relies on 2 things. One of them being the just-in-time concept, where the process really just produces exactly what part is needed for the next step. So there's never a surplus or shortage in production. And then there's also what's called a G-Coda, which is the human-based automation system that really is what Toyota relies on as far as production. It can actually stop the production system. There's any issues, so there's never waste. And they take pride in really refining this system, and a lot of their other competitors have built systems to rival this. And that's another one of their other big strengths. And the reason that the Toyota production system's been so successful is because Toyota's done a really good job of putting a lot of money towards research and development, both for their Prius and for their other cars. And also just going into as we spoke about, just going into the electric car field, having dedicated R&D will be very helpful. Um, as far as weaknesses, um, Toyota's dealt with a lot of quality control issues and recalls, which is always obviously bad for for a car company that's trying to that kind of builds off their brand reputation. Quality control, as far as said, in 2019 there was a 44,000 car recall. That included various cars, both conventional engines and also hybrids, Corollas, Camrys, Camry hybrid, Avalon, the Lexus ES 300H. All these cars were having issues as far as overheating, stalling, and usually needed engine replacement. So that's an internal issue that of quality control that can be stopped before it actually hits the market. Another issue we found was the workplace culture and employee satisfaction. In the recent past 12 months, there hasn't been as many issues as we saw when researching the past 10 years. So, but you have to look at it as a long-term scale. If you're having employee retention, and it's been a 10-year issue, that can still be a problem now. So there's been a lot of workplace culture issues as far as how leadership deals with staff, expectations of employees, things like that. So that's another internal weakness that can carry over to the marketplace. As far as opportunities go, obviously, as we spoke about, there's been a big push into sustainability and taking care of the environment, taking care of our resources. So Toyota, as the largest car company and the largest manufacturer, they can really look into the sustainability and furthering their hybrid and ultimately their electric vehicles to meet the rising demand. And also technological advancement will be another big thing for them to go to rival their competitors. Um, Actually, Toyota's started to do this already as far as seeing this as an advantage. They've already devoted 100 million toward acquiring the best talent and startups available, towards getting AI as far as to benefit their manufacturing software, as well as autonomous mobility and data that deals with autonomous driving and things of that nature, and things that we can see the market going towards in the future. As far as threats, Toyota faces obviously very rigorous competitors. They built the Prius brand and other hybrid brands like it off the hybrid model, and we're going to see as more electric cars become readily available, the hybrid is going to have less of an appeal. So they're really going to have to be able to switch that hybrid target market over to their electric car brand, whatever that may be for the next one. And in the recent, in the next 10 years as well. Another thing that's going to affect Toyota is rising gas prices, and that also kind of plays into our first point. As gas prices rising, even if it's a hybrid, they're still having to buy gas. And if it's rising, that's immediately going to hurt sales, just because if there's an electric alternative, they're going to go towards that. And it's also going to hurt Toyota as far as other conventional rollouts they're planning in 2021 and 2022. Many of those conventional engine models will also be facing very serious competitors, as well as very serious gas hikes in the next 12 to 18 months. And then I'll pass that on.
Thanks, Spencer. This is Yoav. So we wanted to just dive into some of the opportunities specifically for the Toyota Prius, using the Ansoff Matrix framework. I'm going to start with market penetration. And I think my peers have kind of touched on a few of these, is just the increased awareness for kind of green buying, green consciousness. This is, we're seeing this across the industry. We're also seeing it specifically in kind of the millennial and especially millennial moms, that 16 to 40 year old age group. That's definitely starting to have some strong purchasing power. Another opportunity for them in terms of market penetration is marketing their Made in America mentality or campaign, specifically through their parts manufacturing, because you know, a lot of car buyers do think about, is this a foreign, is this a domestic vehicle? Obviously Toyota is a foreign vehicle, but there's an opportunity to market that a lot of the parts are actually made here. So it's, even though it is a foreign, it can be mostly built in America. Spencer just mentioned about the price of gasoline. While that's a threat, it's also maybe an opportunity in terms of you might, the consumers may opt for a vehicle that consumes less gas to offset the high gas prices. And I believe Christina also mentioned the charging stations. This is an area, again, for market penetration, both in terms of an opportunity that like we'll get to later on the diversification side of things, but also just kind of increasing the normalcy and the visibility of electric vehicle and hybrid charging stations. In terms of market development, one of the things that really stands out is the Camry, which is one of the other brands for Toyota, and is really one of their cash cows. So if there's a Camry hybrid vehicle, that's something that's an area for kind of developing a new the Camry buying market, which is at a lower price point generally. There's also, as Christina mentioned, the commercial we saw standing out from the crowd, that group of people, right? How to nurture them, how to identify them, and really build a relationship with them so that there are repeat buyers and also influencers. And then there's, as always, developing foreign market expansion, especially in APAC and Latin America, or Asia Pacific and Latin America, with these countries having emerging middle classes and an increased green consciousness. In terms of product development, similar to the Camry recommendation, I think the Prius name has a lot of brand strength. So the product development would be to kind of create the SUV and pickup trucks with the Prius name. And specifically SUVs and pickup trucks, because in 2020 compared to 2019, those were areas that either grew or they didn't reduce as quickly, or as fast as some of the other brands. So there's a lot of opportunity there for growth. And as we've all said, developing a full electric vehicle is certainly a product development opportunity. In terms of diversification, going out with a new product in a new market, some opportunities there are to develop the hybrid technology for other auto-related industries, such as farming equipment, helicopters, small planes. They could also white label the technology in the Prius, so not just the actual hardware, but the software as well. They could, I know Christina mentioned Blink, create their own charging station or acquire Blink, and turn that into a revenue opportunity in terms of leasing or putting them into across the country. And also there was an opportunity or some diversification in terms of car rental companies who are buying new cars every year. It's also a great way to get drivers kind of essentially test driving the Toyota Prius or their new models. And so that's either through building relationship with existing car rental companies or developing or acquiring their own rental company. In terms of the BCG framework, identifying stars, question marks, cash cows, and dogs, the Prius and their hybrids is definitely a growth area for Toyota, especially compared to a lot of the other lines within the Toyota family. One other line that stood out was the Toyota Supra, which is a relatively new model, but it's their luxury sports car line, which had the highest percentage growth in 2020. And the other one is the Toyota Tacoma, which is an SUV that also grew in 2020. And all of these were kind of the market leaders in their individual lines, or at least the Tacoma and the Prius. In terms of the RAV4, which is a pretty well-known brand, it was in its 4th year as a top seller. The reason I put that as a question mark is because compared to some of the other leaders in the Toyota family, 4 years is just not that long. So, can that be sustained beyond, or are the competitors going to come up with something that will challenge its market leadership? And then the 4Runner, which is another SUV, and the Tundra, which is a truck, had only a 2% reduced sale. But in general, the SUV and truck lines are the most popular in terms of the growth for the company. As I mentioned earlier, the Camry is its cash cow, kind of the lowest end car, lowest price point, and just continues to sell and without much fanfare. And so the dog here is the Lexus Hybrid. So that really tells us a little bit something about kind of, is there, there's certainly more development that needs to be done, whether it's on the marketing side, the messaging, between kind of the higher end or premium models and a hybrid or an electric vehicle. So that's the BCG framework. And I'm going to hand it back over to Spencer.
Yeah, so our recommendations for Toyota is really Toyota's on the right track, launching 2 new PHEVs and also 1 new EV vehicle into U.S. markets in this year. Key considerations are, the product's life cycle, what the adoption rate is, market share, availability of electric power obviously is a big issue. Competition as far as Tesla, Nikola, and other SPAC companies coming into the market, and also market uncertainty tied to the pandemic, and how long that'll reach. Number 2 would be synthesizing targeting the market development of the standout from the crowd buyer. Toyota should invest in fully electric vehicles as far as EV, and pushing cash from the Camry cash cow. So obviously going towards the electric wave, and going towards, over the next 10 years, taking that hybrid reputation, that hybrid brand loyalty, and switching that over into their electric lines. The EV can be tested in the product lines for sedans like Camry and Prius, SUVs like the 4Runner, and trucks like the Tundra. A premium EV sports car could also be tested in burgling the Super line. So anyway, so obviously, these cars can be tested, and they can come in, and they can take a lot of the brands and a lot of the obviously the reputation that Toyota's built over the past 20 years, and they need to take this sustainability and this environmental push, and they need to go towards this and kind of use their brand loyalty and that brand reputation, and kind of extend that into the next 10 to 15 years, and continue to produce high quality products at an affordable price to keep that market. I think we'll go into our references.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thanks, team.